Preface. Some love stories announce themselves loudly. This one doesn't. It begins quietly, the way real lives do, inside communities that already exist, inside people who are already whole. She is Amara Kuroma. She lives in a lakeside town that smells of salt and pine in winter and warm bread in summer, a place small enough to recognize your footsteps, large enough to hold new beginnings. Amara's made a life here slowly, intentionally. She works, she shows up, she belongs. Her days are filled with familiar faces, shared meals, unspoken care. Her roots reach far beyond this place. She is Sierra Leonean by blood and memory, shaped by the warmth of family and her faith. She speaks Creole at home with family, French or English with the world. Her beauty is quiet and unassuming. Dark, smooth, glowing skin, soft curls that frame a face used to listening, more than demanding. She's slender, graceful, and steady. Amara is not searching for love, she is living. And that is why love finds her unguarded. Chapter 1. The Overlap. The morning held itself together with restraint. Gray light pressed gently against the town, smoothing the edges of buildings and muting sound. The lake lay beyond sight, but Amara felt it anyway. The way you feel weather before it arrives. A presence? A rhythm? She walked with her hood down, curls catching the damp air because she liked honesty. If it was cold, she felt it. If the day was heavy, she carried it. There was something grounding about meeting the world exactly as it was. The harbor room stood at the corner of the square, old and solid, its tall windows fogged from the warmth inside. Paper snowflakes clung to the glass like small, hopeful declarations. Amara paused for half a breath before going in. Not hesitation, just awareness. The way she always paused before stepping into shared space. Inside, the room hummed. Coffee, cardboard, wool, low laughter, the soft clatter of boxes being set down. A hand-lettered sign rested against the wall. If you need it, take it. If you have it, leave it. She smiled. That was the town at its best. No performance, no hierarchy. Just care, offered plainly. Amara. Mariama crossed the room in long strides, scarf swinging, joy practically radiating off her. She pulled Amara into a hug that was warm and grounding, the kind that reminded you that you were seen. You made it, Mariama said, stepping back to look at her properly. I said I would, Amara replied, amused. You don't need to sound surprised, Mariama laughed. I always sound surprised. It's part of my charm. She pressed a marker into Amara's hand. We're labeling donations, sizes, seasons, common sense. You'll like it. Amara raised an eyebrow. You say that like I'm predictable. You are, Mariama said cheerfully. And we love you for it. Amara turned toward the tables, scanning the room. Not searching, just orienting herself. That was when she felt it. Not a pull, not attraction, a shift. As if the air itself had recalibrated. She looked up. He stood near the far wall, lifting boxes with unhurried precision. Sleeves pushed up. Movements economical, practiced. He didn't rush or linger. He simply did the work in front of him fully. There was nothing theatrical about him. And yet, her attention settled, unwilling to move on. He carried himself like someone used to responsibility. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair slightly disordered, as if he'd stopped caring what it did once he stepped outside. His skin held an olive warmth that didn't belong to winter. Then he turned. Their eyes met, not dramatically, not abruptly. It felt more like a quiet alignment, 2 points settling into the same line. His gaze was steady, curious, but contained. As though he were seeing her clearly without trying to claim anything from the sight. Something in her chest tightened. Not sharply. Gently, like a held breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. He nodded once. A simple acknowledgement. And then he returned to his task. Amara exhaled, surprised by the relief of it. Mariama, of course, noticed everything. Oh, Mariama murmured beside her. You felt that? I felt someone look at me. Amara said lightly. Mariama's smile widened. Sure you did. Amara turned back to the table, focusing on the box in front of her. Medium. Winter coats. Her hands moved easily. Her thoughts did not. She was aware of him without watching him, of his presence in the room the way you're aware of a hearth fire, even when you're not looking directly at it, not consuming. Grounding. At some point, she lifted a labeled box and carried it toward the stacking area, mostly because it gave her something to do with her restlessness. He was there. Up close, he felt taller. Not imposing. Anchored. His attention shifted to her as she approached. Polite. Open. Where would you like this? She asked. He glanced at the label, then gestured. There's space just to the left. Thank you. His voice was low, calm. Not distant. Measured. There was the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't place immediately. Something rounded at the edges. French, she thought. She slid the box into place, then straightened. You're new, she said before she could overthink it. He didn't bristle, didn't smile it off. He considered her honestly. Yes, he said. I am. What brought you here? The question surprised her with its directness, but it felt right, unforced. He looked past her for a moment toward the fogged windows, as if checking something inward. Work, he said. Then after a pause, and quiet, the word landed between them, soft but weighted. Amara nodded. This place is good for that. So I'm learning, he replied. They stood there a moment longer than necessary. The room carried on around them, voices rising and falling, boxes shifting, but the space between them felt oddly intact. I'm Amara, she said finally. His expression softened as though the name mattered. Lucian, he replied. The way he said it, simply, without flourish, made her want to hear it again. Nice to meet you, she said. Likewise. Mariama's voice cut across the room, calling for help at the other table. Amara glanced over her shoulder. I should... she began. Lucian nodded. Of course. She hesitated, then added, Welcome. Something warm flickered behind his eyes. Thank you. As she walked away, Mariama appeared at her side instantly. You exchanged names, Mariama whispered, triumphant. Yes, Amara said. Like a normal person. Mariama beamed. I'm proud of you. Amara laughed softly, but her awareness lingered. Of Lucian's presence, of the calm he brought with him without effort. Nothing had changed. And yet, something had shifted. Not a spark, an alignment. The kind that didn't announce itself loudly. The kind that waited. Chapter 2. What holds? Sunday morning came quietly, the way Amara preferred it. The town had not yet decided what kind of day it wanted to be. The streets were still, the sky pale and undecided, the lake hidden behind mist that softened everything it touched. Amara moved through her apartment with practiced ease. Coffee brewed, hair gathered loosely, a sweater pulled on without much thought. She liked early mornings because they asked nothing of her. The church sat just off the main road, modest and unassuming. No grand façade. No sharp edges. Just a building that held people who came as they were and tried, in their own imperfect ways, to live better than they had the week before. She slipped into a familiar pew as the music began. Soft, reverent, not performative. She closed her eyes, letting the stillness settle. Her faith was not loud. It didn't announce itself or demand agreement. It shaped her quietly. How she listened, how she forgave, how she tried to remain open even when it would have been easier to close herself off. It reminded her that love was an action, not a posture. She bowed her head as the pastor spoke about steadiness, about choosing gentleness in a world that rewarded urgency, about showing up, not perfectly, but honestly. The words met her where she was. By the time the service ended, something in her felt aligned. Not euphoric, anchored. Outside, she exchanged smiles and brief greetings with people who knew her name and her rhythm. Someone squeezed her hand, someone asked about her week. She promised to check in on a neighbor later in the afternoon. Belonging for her was made of these small, repeated gestures. She headed straight from church to Mariama's apartment. The door was open before she knocked. "Come in before the eggs burn," Mariama called. Inside, the air buzzed with warmth and conversation. Aisha stood at the stove, already mid-complaint about work. Nadine sat at the table, scrolling through her phone and offering commentary. Music played low in the background, something familiar, something easy. Amara dropped her bag and stepped into a hug. "You're glowing," Mariama said, pulling back. "Church?" Amara smiled. "Always." "Good," Mariama said simply, and went back to her pan. They gathered around the table with plates balanced on mismatched napkins. The conversation wandered the way it always did. Jobs, family updates, shared annoyances, laughter that came easily because it was safe here. At one point, Nadine glanced at Amara over her mug. "You're quiet today," she said, in a thoughtful way. Amara shrugged lightly. "Just present," Mariama smirked. She met a man. Amara shot her a look. "You promised." "I promised not to interrogate," Mariama corrected. "I did not promise not to observe." Aisha leaned back, curious but gentle. "Did you like him?" The question was simple, honest. Amara considered it. "I didn't decide yet," she said finally. They laughed, but not unkindly. They understood her. She didn't rush conclusions. She let things reveal themselves. "Well," Nadine said, standing to clear plates, "whoever he is, he's already done one thing right." "What's that?" Mariama asked. "He made her pause," Nadine replied. "That's rare." Amara didn't argue. After brunch, she walked the few streets to her brother's house. The sound of children reached her before the door opened. Laughter, running footsteps, the thump of something dropped with enthusiasm. Her brother greeted her with a smile that held both affection and familiarity. He pulled her into a brief hug before stepping aside. "You eat?" he asked. "Too much," she replied. "Good," he said. "Sit anyway." The house was full in the best way. Toys scattered, voices overlapping, life happening without apology. His wife caught Amara's eye from across the room and smiled, pressing a mug into her hand before she could protest. Later, when the noise softened and the children were distracted, her brother sat beside her at the kitchen table. "You seem settled," he said. "I am," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "Settled doesn't mean stagnant?" She met his gaze calmly. "I know," he nodded, satisfied. He had never tried to steer her life, only to stand close enough to guard the edges. "Just remember," he said, "you don't have to carry everything alone." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't." When she left, the afternoon light had shifted. The town felt slower, softer. She walked home instead of driving, letting her thoughts move without urgency. Her life felt full. Faith that grounded her. Friends who saw her clearly. Family who loved her without conditions. A community that didn't require her to perform. And still, as she unlocked her door, Lucien's name surfaced again. Uninvited, but not unwelcome. Not as a question, not as longing, just as awareness. She smiled faintly to herself and stepped inside, closing the door on the quiet. Not knowing yet that quiet was exactly where something new would grow. Chapter 3. The Keeping. Lucien did not think of the gathering as a meeting. Meetings implied urgency, debate, the need to resolve something. What drew him north that afternoon was older than that. It was rhythm, a return, the kind of summons that lived in the body long before it reached the mind. He left the town behind as the light began to thin, the road narrowing as it climbed. The air changed first, cooler, sharper, carrying the clean scent of pine and damp earth. By the time the pavement gave way to gravel, Lucien had already quieted himself. Whatever he carried from the human world stayed folded inside him, contained. The place they gathered was not marked on any map. It didn't need to be. The land itself recognized them. The clearing sat between old trees whose roots twisted deep and patient, whose branches filtered the sky into something softer. They had come here for generations, not always in these bodies, not always under the same names, but always with the same understanding. This was where they remembered who they were. Lucien arrived first, as he often did. Not because he was early by nature, but because he liked to feel the place before it filled. He stepped into the clearing and rested his palm briefly against the trunk of the nearest tree. The land responded the way it always had, not with words, but with steadiness. One by one, the others came. Matthew emerged from the west, measured and unhurried. He carried the quiet authority of someone who had borne responsibility longer than the rest, his presence grounding without effort. Julian followed not long after, eyes alert, expression thoughtful, as though he were always halfway through considering a question no one else had thought to ask. Etienne arrived silently, crouching almost immediately to touch the ground, fingers pressing into the soil as if checking a pulse. And finally, Renee, restless, kinetic, energy barely contained, paced in from the north, tension riding his shoulders like a challenge. They acknowledged one another with nods, brief touches to shoulders, the small rituals of familiarity that required no explanation. These were not simply brothers by blood or bond. They were custodians. Each of them had been taught the same truth early on. The world did not belong to them, but they belonged to it. Their shifting was not a gift for dominance or spectacle. It was a means of listening more closely, to the land, to the balance that kept both human and unseen worlds from tipping too far in either direction. They gathered when something required witness. Sometimes that something was external, a change in the land, a disturbance that needed tending. Other times, it was one of their own. Mathieu's gaze settled on Lucien first. It often did. "You've rooted yourself quickly," Mathieu said. Not as judgment, but observation. Lucien inclined his head. "The town holds well," Julian smiled faintly. "It does. That's why it's dangerous," Renee snorted. "Everything human is dangerous if you stay too long." Etienne rose slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. "And everything worth protecting lives there." They fell into silence, letting the forest fill the space between words. This was how they spoke best. Through restraint, through what was not rushed. Finally, Mathieu addressed Lucien again. "You didn't come because of the land." "No," he said quietly. The air shifted, not with alarm, but attention. "Say it plainly," Renee said, impatience threading his voice. "We're not children." Lucien exhaled once, steadying himself. "I encountered someone." "A human," Julian said. "Yes." Etienne studied him closely. "And she matters." Lucien hesitated. Not because he doubted the truth, but because naming it felt like setting something down where it could be seen. "She is rooted," he said carefully. "She belongs to her life, to her people. There is no fracture in her." Mathieu's expression remained composed, but his eyes sharpened. "Then the risk is greater." Lucien met his gaze without flinching. "I know, you always do," Renee muttered. "And you always stay anyway." "That is not fair," Etienne said quietly. "No," Renee shot back. "It's accurate." Mathieu raised a hand, and the exchange stilled. "This is not about fear," he said. "It is about memory." They all understood what he meant. They had seen this before. Love, approached with care and intention, could still leave scars when time moved unevenly. Humans aged. Their lives unfolded quickly, brightly, and ended. The loss was not sudden. It was prolonged, cumulative, etched over years. Lucien had never forgotten that. "I have not crossed any line," Lucien said. "Nor do I intend to." Julian tilted his head. "Intentions are not boundaries." "No," Lucien agreed. "But they are beginnings." The forest held them again, winds stirring the branches above. Mathieu stepped closer, his voice low. "You are free to choose your path, Lucien. We do not forbid love. We only ask that you remember your purpose alongside it." Lucien nodded. "I have not lost sight of it." Etienne's voice softened. "Then walk carefully." Renee sighed, the tension easing slightly from his frame. "You always do." The gathering ended without decree or warning. It always did. They trusted one another not because they were infallible, but because they were accountable. As Lucien made his way back toward the town, twilight settling in layers, his thoughts returned, unbidden, unwelcome, undeniable, to Amara. Not as temptation, as presence, as someone who lived fully within her world, and in doing so, had shifted something quietly inside his own. He did not imagine futures. He had learned better. But he allowed himself, just once, to acknowledge the truth he would carry carefully from here on. Some encounters are not meant to be dismissed. They are meant to be tended. Chapter 4. The pull. The second time Amara saw Lucian, she felt it before she understood it. Not surprise, not coincidence. Pull. She stood in the small produce market near the square, one hand resting on the edge of a wooden crate, trying to decide whether the tomatoes were worth their price this week. The bell over the door chimed, soft and familiar, and something in her chest shifted, as if a quiet thread had been drawn taut. She looked up. Lucien stood just inside the doorway, the afternoon light catching briefly in his dark hair before he stepped fully inside. He paused, scanning the room with the same deliberate awareness she remembered from the harbor room, as though he never entered a space without first listening to it. Then his gaze found her. The moment landed like recognition sharpened into certainty. He did not smile right away. Neither did she. They simply looked at one another, the air between them subtly charged, as if something unspoken had finally decided to surface. He was the first to move. "Amara," he said, her name low and steady, as if he'd been carrying it with him. "Lucy," she replied, surprised by the warmth that rose at the sound of his voice. They stood a few feet apart, neither rushing closer, both acutely aware of the distance. "I was hoping I'd see you again," he said honestly. Her breath caught, not because of the words themselves, but because of how plainly he spoke them. "I was wondering if I would," she admitted. A faint smile curved his mouth, then, not practiced, not performative. Something quieter, more intimate. "I don't usually wonder," he said. She felt that truth in him, deep and unquestioned. "What changed?" "You," he replied without hesitation. The simplicity of it made her laugh softly, a sound that seemed to ease something in his shoulders. "I'm buying vegetables," she said lightly, grounding herself. "Not making life-altering decisions. Sometimes those are the same thing," he said, glancing at the tomatoes. "You're still deciding." "They look good," she said, "but they'll disappoint you if you expect too much." He studied her, eyes dark with interest. "I don't expect perfection. That's rare. So, I've been told." They fell into an easy rhythm then, moving through the aisles together, comparing notes on food, on the town, on the small habits that made a place feel like home. Every exchange felt layered, as though each question carried another beneath it. "You listen differently," he observed at one point. She looked at him. "How so?" "Like you're present," he said. "Not waiting for your turn." She considered that. "I learned early that people tell you who they are if you give them space." His gaze held hers, something thoughtful flickering behind it. "That's true." When they checked out, their hands brushed as they reached for their bags. The contact was brief, but it landed, warm and grounding. Like a point of contact neither of them had expected to matter so much. Outside, the air was brighter, the clouds thinning just enough to let sunlight through. "I'm walking," she said, though she hadn't planned to say anything at all. "I was hoping you would," he replied. They set off together, their steps matching without effort. The pull between them didn't lessen with movement, it deepened, settled into something steady and undeniable. "Tell me about you," he said after a moment. "Not the version you give strangers." She glanced at him, startled by the request, and by how safe it felt. "I value steadiness," she said slowly. "I believe in showing up. I don't think love should cost you yourself." His expression softened, something almost reverent crossing his face. "You speak like someone who's chosen her life carefully." "I have," she said. "What about you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I believe in purpose," he said finally. "Intending what's been entrusted to you, in not taking more than you're meant to." "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes," he admitted. "But it's honest." They reached the corner where her street began, and neither of them moved to stop the moment from stretching. "I want to know more about you," he said. The words weighted but gentle. "If that's something you'd allow." She met his gaze fully now, her heart steady but open. "I do," she said. "I just don't rush." "I wouldn't ask you to." That evening, they found themselves in the same room again. Mariama's, full of warmth and overlapping voices. This time, the pull between them was unmistakable. They gravitated toward one another naturally, conversation resuming as though it had only been paused, not ended. Their dialogue deepened about faith and doubt, about belonging, about the strange ache of wanting to be fully known without being consumed. They listened, they reflected, they challenged gently. At one point, Lucien leaned closer, his voice low. "There's something about you," he said. "You feel like home." Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with recognition. "Home isn't a place," she said softly. "It's how you're held." His gaze lingered, intense and careful. "Then I hope I'm holding this right." When he left later that night, the space he vacated felt noticeable. Not empty, just marked. Amara stood at the door long after it closed, hand resting against the frame, heart humming with awareness. This was not infatuation, not fantasy. It was gravity. And it was pulling them both, slowly, deliberately, towards something that would require truth, courage, and care. She did not step away from it, neither did he. Chapter 5. The line between. Amara's days had a rhythm she trusted. Morning meetings, client calls, the quiet satisfaction of finishing something properly. She liked work that required presence, projects that benefited from patience more than speed. She spent her afternoons coordinating community initiatives, consulting for small organizations that needed structure without rigidity. People trusted her. They told her things. They listened when she spoke. Lucien learned this about her slowly. Not from observation alone, but from conversation. They met often now, but never carelessly. Coffee after work, walks that turned into dinners, shared errands that felt like time well spent rather than filled. "What do you do when you're not saving the town?" Lucien asked one evening as they walked back from the market, her bag heavier than it needed to be. She laughed. "I don't save anything. I help people make sense of what they already have." "That's harder," he said. She glanced at him. "What about you?" You're still avoiding the question. "I work with land trusts," he replied. "Restoration. Quiet projects." "You say that like it's a translation." "It is." She stopped walking. "You're allowed to tell me the real version." Lucien met her gaze. "I am. I'm choosing the right order." That answer unsettled her and reassured her at the same time. They reached her street, but neither of them moved apart. "Come by tomorrow," she said suddenly. "There's a fundraiser at the community center. I'll be there late." Lucien hesitated. "Just a fraction." "I will," he said. "If you're sure." "I am." The next evening was loud and bright and full. Music echoed through the hall. Children ran between tables. Familiar faces greeted Amara with ease. Lucien arrived quietly as he always did, but this time, Amara saw the tension in his shoulders immediately. "You okay?" she asked, handing him a cup. "Yes," he said quickly. She didn't accept it. "Lucien," he exhaled. "Something feels off." Before she could ask what he meant, the power flickered. Lights dimmed, then surged back unevenly. A few people laughed it off. Someone clapped sarcastically. And then, the sound? Low, close, wrong. Amara felt it more than heard it. A vibration in her chest that didn't belong indoors. Lucien stiffened beside her. "Stay here," he said, voice suddenly sharp. "What?" she asked. "Lucien, what is that?" His jaw clenched. "You need to go inside now." She grabbed his arm. "You don't get to disappear on me." The sound came again, closer this time. A growl, unmistakable now. People began to notice. Conversations stilled. Someone screamed. Lucien turned to her, eyes dark, urgent. "Amara, listen to me. There are things you don't know about me." "Then tell me," she said, heart racing. "Right now. I can't. Not like this." The crowd was shifting toward panic. A child cried. Someone knocked over a table. Lucien swore under his breath in French. He pulled her toward the side exit, fast but controlled. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Something followed me," he said. "Something I thought I'd outrun." They burst outside into the cold night air. The growl came again, this time from the tree line behind the center. Lucien stopped. "No," he murmured. Amara's voice shook. "Lucien?" He turned to her fully now, hands gripping her shoulders. "Whatever you see next," he said, "you need to trust that I would never hurt you." Her breath came fast. "You're scaring me." "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry." The growl rose into a snarl. Lucien stepped back, then froze. His body went rigid, breath hitching, muscles tightening unnaturally beneath his jacket. His eyes flickered gold for the briefest second before he squeezed them shut. Amara staggered back. "Lucian, run," he said, voice breaking. "Please." She didn't. Instead, she whispered, "I'm not leaving you." The air seemed to split. Bones shifted. Fabric tore. The sound was violent and unmistakable. And then, a wolf stood where Lucian had been. Massive. Silver-black fur catching the light. Eyes glowing with intelligence and restraint. Amara's knees nearly gave out. The other creature lunged from the trees. Feral, wild, wrong, in a way Lucian never had been. The wolf that was Lucian moved instantly. Power, precision, protection. Amara backed against the wall, heart pounding, every instinct screaming. And yet, beneath the terror, something deeper held her steady. This is Lucian, she thought. This is who he is. The fight was brutal, but brief. The other wolf fled, wounded, vanishing back into the forest. Silence followed. Heavy, trembling. The wolf turned toward her. Lucian's eyes, still his eyes, met hers. He did not approach. He sat, lowered his head, waited. Amara slid down the wall, shaking, breath coming in short bursts. "Okay," she whispered hoarsely. "Okay, I'm still here." The wolf stepped back into the shadows. Moments later, Lucian emerged, barefoot, shaken, human again. He couldn't look at her. "I never wanted you to see that," he said. "I never wanted to bring danger into your life." Amara stood slowly, every step deliberate. "You didn't," she said. "You stepped into it from me." He looked up then, pain etched into his face. "You should walk away," he said. Now, she stopped in front of him. "Lucian," she said quietly, firmly. "You don't get to decide that alone." The truth hung between them. Raw, exposed, impossible to ignore. And neither of them knew yet what it would cost to stay. Chapter 6. What Remains. They did not speak at first. The night held them in a fragile stillness, broken only by the distant sound of the lake and the low hum of the town returning to itself. Sirens never came. No one followed them outside. Whatever had happened had passed unseen by most, folded back into the dark where it could be explained away as imagination, fear, anything easier than truth. Lucian sat on the edge of the curb, elbows on his knees, head bowed. He looked smaller somehow. Not diminished. Exposed. Amara leaned against the brick wall of the community center, arms wrapped tightly around herself, breath still uneven. Her body trembled, but her mind was startlingly clear. "You could have warned me," she said finally. Lucian flinched. "I wanted to," he said quietly. "Every time I tried, I thought, not yet. I wanted you to know me first." She nodded slowly. "I did know you." He looked up then, eyes red-rimmed, searching her face. "And now?" She pushed off the wall and took a step toward him. Then another. Each movement felt deliberate, like crossing a threshold. "Now I know more," she said. "That's not the same as knowing less." His voice broke. "Amara, I am not safe. Not to love, not to stay close to." She stopped in front of him. "You didn't ask me what I need," he swallowed. "What do you need?" "The truth," she said. "All of it. And the space to decide for myself." Lucian nodded once. "Then let me start there." They sat on the curb together, a careful distance between them. He spoke quietly, plainly. "No myth, no drama. My family has carried this for centuries," he said. "We shift. Wolves, always wolves. Not because we chose it, but because we were entrusted with it. Protection, balance, the things humans don't see until they're already broken." She listened, eyes steady on his hands, strong, scarred, still faintly trembling. "The one tonight wasn't from my line," he continued. "Feral. Unbound. He's been crossing territory, breaking rules we've kept for a long time. I thought he'd moved on. And he followed you here, she said. Yes. To me? Lucian's jaw tightened. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Amara was quiet for a moment. You didn't bring him, she said. You stopped him. He shook his head. You don't understand the risk. I understand this, she said firmly. You stood between me and something that could have killed me. You didn't hesitate. That's instinct, he said. It doesn't make me good. She turned to face him fully now. Lucien, don't do that. Don't reduce what you did just because it scares you. He looked at her then. Really looked. You're not afraid, he said softly. I am, she admitted. But fear isn't the same as rejection. Silence stretched between them again. This time, heavier, but steadier. My brother is going to ask questions, she said at last. Lucia nodded. As he should. He won't believe everything, she added. But he'll believe me. Lucian's expression tightened. I don't want to put you in the middle. You didn't, she said. Life did. We're just responding. She stood, offering him her hand. He hesitated. Lucia. He took it. They walked in silence to her car. She drove them to her place without comment, the familiar streets grounding her. When they arrived, she turned off the engine and rested her forehead briefly against the steering wheel. I need you to know something, she said quietly. Yes? My faith teaches me to discern, she said. Not to deny what's in front of me just because it doesn't fit neatly. He closed his eyes. I don't want to test that faith. You're not, she replied. You're telling the truth. That matters. She turned to him. But this doesn't mean everything is settled. I wouldn't expect it to be. It means, she continued, we slow down. We talk. We let other people in where it's safe. He nodded. Whatever you need. She opened the door. Tonight, you're not alone. That's what I need. Lucien followed her inside. From the window, the town looked unchanged. Quiet, sleeping, unaware of the line that had been crossed and redrawn just beyond its edge. Inside, two people sat at opposite ends of a couch, the space between them not empty, but holding something fragile and real. Whatever came next would not be simple, but it would be honest. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 7. What is Chosen? Amara did not sleep. She lay awake in the quiet of her apartment, the early hours stretching thin and pale against the ceiling. Lucien sat in the armchair across the room, unmoving, as if stillness were a form of penance. They had spoken in fragments through the night. Enough to stay grounded, not enough to settle anything. By morning, she knew one thing with clarity that surprised her. She could not carry this alone. Her brother listened without interrupting. They sat at his kitchen table, the same one where homework had been done, and bills paid, and hard conversations held without spectacle. His wife had taken the kids out, sensing, without being told, that this was not a moment for questions. Amara told him the truth. Not every detail, not every fear, but enough. There's something about Lucia, she said carefully, fingers wrapped around her mug. Something dangerous, something not human. Her brother leaned back, arms crossed, eyes steady on her face. And you're safe? Yes. Are you sure? She met his gaze. I've never been more sure of anything. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you're asking me to trust him. I'm asking you to trust me. That did it? He exhaled, slow and controlled, like someone setting something heavy down. If you were afraid, I'd already be on my feet. If you were lying to yourself, I'd hear it in your voice. She swallowed. I don't know how long this can last. That's true of every relationship, he said. Most people just pretend otherwise. He leaned forward. What are you actually deciding? Amara stared at the grain of the table. Whether I step fully into this, whether I become his mate. Her brother's jaw tightened, not in anger, but concern. And what does that mean? It means choosing him for as long as I live, she said softly. Not ownership, not eternity, just fidelity. Presence, a bond that doesn't end early because it's hard. He studied her. And what does it cost you? She thought of her life, her friends, her church, her work, the steady shape of her days. Nothing that makes me smaller, she said. Only braver. He nodded once. Then I'll stand with you. But you don't hide from me. Ever. I won't. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Bring him by. I want to look him in the eye. She smiled faintly. He'll expect that. Lucien met his brothers at dusk. The clearing was the same. Ancient, quiet, listening, but the air felt sharper, as if the land itself were alert. Lucien arrived last this time. He did not apologize. Matthew spoke first. She knows. Lucien inclined his head. Yes. Renee paced, restless. And she's still here? Yes. Julian watched Lucien closely. You didn't compel her. Lucien's voice was firm. Never. Etienne stepped closer, eyes kind, searching. What does she want? Lucien swallowed. Time. Truth. The right to choose. Matthew studied him. And what do you want? The question landed heavier than the rest. I want to walk beside her, Lucien said. Not ahead of her, not above her. I want to offer the bond and accept her answer, whatever it is. Renee stopped pacing. You know what a human mate means? Yes. She will age, Renee said. She will die. Lucien did not look away. So will the world. We don't love to avoid loss. We love because of it. Silence followed. Dense, reverent. Matthew stepped forward. If she chooses you, the bond will be recognized. She will be protected as one of ours, but the cost will be borne by you. Lucien nodded. I accept it. Etienne smiled gently. Then you had better be worthy, Julian added quietly. And honest. Always. Lucien exhaled. That is the only way this works. They dispersed without ceremony. No blessings spoken aloud. No prohibition given. Trust was their currency, and it had been extended. That night, Lucien stood on Amara's porch, the town quiet around them. She opened the door and didn't pretend surprise. I told him, she said. He nodded. I told them. They stood there, the space between them charged with something steadier than fear. I need you to understand, Amara said, voice calm, resolved. If I choose this, it's not because I'm overwhelmed or dazzled. It's because I'm willing. Lucien's throat tightened. I would never rush you. I know, she said. That's why I'm here. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him, the truth of him. I don't promise forever, she said. I promise now. And every day after, as long as I'm given them. Lucien bowed his head. Overcome. That is more than enough. She reached for his hands, grounding him. I haven't said yes yet. He stilled. I understand, but, she added, meeting his eyes, I'm leaning toward courage. A slow, reverent smile broke across his face. They did not seal anything that night. They stood together under the quiet sky, two lives aligned at the edge of choice, knowing that whatever came next would be entered into freely, faithfully, and without illusion. And that in the end was the rarest bond of all. Chapter 8. Those Who Know. Amara learned quickly that truth had a way of rearranging the familiar. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to make you look again. Her days still moved forward, work, errands, quiet evenings. But now there was an added layer of attention. A listening beneath the listening, a noticing beneath the noticing. She found herself watching people differently, feeling for the weight of what was unsaid. Lucien noticed the shift before she named it. You're listening harder, he said one evening as they walked toward Mariama's place, the windows already glowing with warmth and laughter. I don't know how not to, Amara replied. Once you realize there's more, you stop assuming you've seen everything. He glanced at her, thoughtful. That instinct will keep you safe. She smiled faintly. Or get me into trouble. Sometimes both, he said. Inside, the apartment was alive. Mariama moved through the kitchen with practiced chaos. Aisha sat cross-legged on the floor, laughing at something on her phone. Nadine leaned against the counter, glass of wine in hand, eyes sharper than she let on. The moment Lucien stepped fully inside, the air shifted. Not for everyone. For Nadine. She stilled, just for a second. Long enough for Amara to notice. Nadine's gaze lifted slowly, tracking Lucian with an intensity that had nothing to do with curiosity. Her shoulders squared subtly, like someone bracing without wanting to be seen doing it. Lucian felt it too. His posture changed, not defensive but alert. The way he'd gone still in the clearing with his brothers. The way a predator recognized another, not as threat, but as kin. Amara's pulse quickened. Mariama, oblivious, clapped her hands. Okay, everyone eat before I lose my mind. Dinner unfolded easily at first, conversation overlapping, jokes traded, plates passed. Lucian spoke comfortably, answering questions about work, about the town, about nothing that mattered too deeply. Nadine watched him the entire time. Finally, when Mariama disappeared into the kitchen and Aisha stepped out onto the balcony to take a call, Nadine spoke. Amara, she said casually, can I borrow you for a second? Amara followed her into the quiet hallway, heart already pounding. Nadine closed the door gently. You brought a wolf into my space, Nadine said, voice low and controlled. Amara stared at her. What did you just say? Nadine's eyes shifted, just slightly. Not color. Depth. Something golden and feral flickered beneath the surface before settling again. I didn't mean to say it like that, Nadine added. But yes, I know. Amara's breath left her in a rush. You're lion, Nadine said simply. Born, not bitten. My mother's line. Silence pressed in. You felt him? Amara whispered. I felt him the second he crossed the threshold, Nadine replied. And I felt you beside him. Her voice softened then. Are you safe? Amara didn't hesitate. Yes. Nadine studied her face carefully, searching for cracks, for denial. She found none. You trust him, Nadine said. Yes. Nadine exhaled slowly. Then I need to speak to him. Amara swallowed. He won't hurt you. Nadine's mouth curved faintly. I'm not worried about me. They returned to the living room together. Lucian looked up immediately. His gaze met Nadine's, and something passed between them. Recognition, assessment, respect. Nadine didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. Walk with me, she said to Lucia. Now. Mariama blinked. Did I miss something? Amara touched her arm. We'll explain later. On the balcony, the night air was sharp and clean. The city lights glimmered below. You're far from your pack, Nadine said. Lucian inclined his head. Yes. And you're bound to her, Nadine continued. Not yet, but close. Lucian did not deny it. I would never claim what isn't freely given. Nadine nodded once. Good answer. Her voice dropped. If you hurt her, I won't come for you in anger. I'll come in silence. Lucian met her gaze steadily. You won't have to. They stood there a moment longer, two predators holding stillness like a truce. Finally, Nadine stepped back. She chooses well, she said. That's all. Inside, Amara's friends watched their return with curiosity, but no pressure. They sensed perhaps that something important had been said. Later, as the night wound down, Mariama cornered Amara with a knowing look. Okay, she said. You don't get to bring mysterious men and secret hallway conversations into my house without explanation? Amara smiled, tired but grounded. Soon, Mariama studied her face, then nodded. All right, but I'm watching him. Amara laughed softly. So am I. When they left, walking home beneath a quiet sky, Amara slipped her hand into Lucian's. You felt her, she said. Yes. And you're not angry? No, he replied. I'm relieved. She looked up at him. Why? Because you're not alone, he said simply. And anyone who stands guard for you stands with me. Amara squeezed his hand, heart full in a way that felt steady rather than overwhelming. Her world had widened, not fractured. And as the night closed gently around them, she understood something with calm certainty. Whatever yes awaited her, it would not be made in isolation. She was surrounded, and she was protected. Chapter 9, The Weight of Yes. The question did not leave her. It followed Amara through her days. Not loudly, not insistently, but with a steady patience that felt almost respectful. Would you choose him? Not in theory, not in romance, in practice, in consequence. She noticed how the question changed the way she moved through the world. At work, she found herself more attentive to limits, where she said yes too quickly, where she carried responsibility that was never hers to begin with. She began delegating more, trusting others to hold what she had always quietly absorbed. Lucian noticed that too. "You're protecting your energy," he said one evening as they cooked together in her kitchen, vegetables spread across the counter between them. "I'm practicing," she replied. "If I'm going to choose something big, I can't be exhausted when I do." He smiled at that. "You approach even love with wisdom." She glanced at him. "Don't romanticize it." "I'm scared." "I know," he said gently. "So am I." They spoke more openly now, about work, about fatigue, about the small compromises that accumulated into resentment if left unnamed. Lucien told her about his projects with the land trust, areas where development had been paused because something old and necessary still lived there. He spoke about long nights restoring boundaries no one would ever see, about the quiet satisfaction of prevention rather than repair. "You work so the worst never happens," Amara said. "Yes, that's lonely." "It can be," he admitted, "but it matters." She nodded, understanding that kind of labor intimately. Later that week, the drama came quietly. Not with teeth or blood, with warning. Nadine called Amara late one night, voice low and urgent. "He's back," Nadine said. Amara sat up immediately. "The feral?" "Yes, not close yet, but circling, testing." Lucien was at her side before she could speak his name. Already alert, already listening. "I'll tell my brothers," he said calmly. Nadine hesitated. "Lucien, this isn't just about territory." Amara felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "It's about you," Nadine said. "He knows you matter." The call ended with promises of vigilance, of coordination, of restraint. Afterward, the apartment felt too quiet. Lucien stood near the window, hands braced on the sill, gaze fixed on the dark beyond. "This is why I tried to keep distance," he said quietly. Amara crossed the room and stood beside him. "Distance wouldn't have protected me. It would have just kept me uninformed." He turned to her, pain flickering across his face. "You shouldn't have to factor danger into love." "Every woman does," she said softly. "Most just don't name it." That stopped him. "You don't get to carry this alone," she continued. "Not fear, not strategy, not responsibility. If I'm choosing you, I'm choosing awareness too." His voice dropped. "And if you don't, then we adjust," she said. "But we don't pretend nothing changed." They stood there a long time, breathing in sync, the weight of possibility settling between them. 2 nights later, the brothers gathered again. This time, Amara was not present, but she was no longer absent from the conversation. "She's a point of leverage now," Renee said bluntly. "And a point of strength?" Etienne countered. Mathieu looked to Lucien. "You must be clear-eyed. If she becomes your mate, the protection extends. But so does attention." "I know," Lucien said. Julien's gaze was sharp. "Do you?" Lucien didn't bristle. "Yes. And I also know this. She will not be hidden. She will not be managed. If I bond with her, it will be as she is." Mathieu studied him. "And if she chooses not to?" Lucien exhaled slowly. "Then I step back. Fully." Silence followed. Not because they doubted him, but because they believed him. Back in town, Amara sat at her brother's table again, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. "There's risk," she said simply. Her brother nodded. "There always is. This one has teeth." He didn't smile. "So do you." She met his gaze, surprised. "You're thoughtful," he continued. "Not naive. If you're asking whether I'll stand with you if you say yes, yes. If you say no, also yes." Her eyes stung. "Thank you." That night, when Lucien walked her home, the air felt charged. Not with danger, but decision. They stopped beneath the porch light. Neither rushed. "I'm not asking you tonight," Lucien said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But I need you to know something," he continued. If you say yes, I will not make you smaller to keep you safe. I will stand beside you and trust you to stand beside me." Amara looked at him, really looked at the restraint, the honesty, the willingness to let her choose freely. Her heart settled. "I'm not ready to speak." "But yes," she said. He nodded, steady. "And when you are?" She stepped closer, resting her hand over his heart. "You'll know," she said, "because I won't be afraid." Lucian covered her hand with his own, reverent. The weight of yes did not press on her anymore. It rested. And in that rest, something true was taking shape. Chapter 10. The Vow and the Bond. The yes did not come in a rush. It came in the quiet certainty that followed prayer, counsel, and the deep settling of her spirit. Amara asked Lucian to meet her at the church early, before the sun had fully lifted itself over the town. The building was still, lights dim, the sanctuary holding the soft hush it always did before people arrived. This was the place where she had learned how to listen, not just to God, but to herself. Lucian stood beside her at the altar, hands folded, posture reverent. He looked different here. Not diminished, not out of place, but softened. As though standing in a space shaped by faith required a different kind of strength. There were no crowds. Just her brother and his wife. Mariama, Aisha, and Nadine sitting close together in the front pew. A pastor who knew Amara well enough to understand that this was not spectacle, but covenant. When the vows were spoken, they were simple. "I choose you," Amara said clearly. "Not because you are extraordinary, but because you are faithful." Lucian's voice was steady when he answered. "I choose you not to claim your life, but to walk within it for as long as I am permitted." The pastor smiled, eyes misted. "What God has joined with intention and love, let no fear pull apart." When Lucian kissed her, it was gentle, grounded. A beginning, not a culmination. They walked out of the church, hand in hand, sunlight breaking fully now, the town going about its business, unaware that something sacred had just taken place. But the marriage, human, legal, spoken, was only part of what needed to be sealed. That night, Lucian took her north. The road narrowed, the air cooled. The trees grew older, denser, as if they were stepping backward through time rather than forward. Amara felt no fear, only awareness. Nadine had hugged her before she left, pressing her forehead to Amara's and whispering, "I'll be near." The clearing was lit by firelight when they arrived. The brothers stood waiting, not in judgment, not in ceremony, but in witness. Mathieu inclined his head. Etienne's expression was warm. Julian's gaze was thoughtful. Renee restless, but respectful. Lucian led Amara to the center and turned to face her. "This is the second vow," he said quietly. "Not required, but offered." He took her hands, grounding her. "If you accept the bond, you will be recognized as my mate among my kind. You will be protected. You will be known. No one will touch you without consequence." She nodded. "I understand." He drew a slow breath. "On our bonding night, I can mark you," he said. "Not to turn you. You would remain human, but the bond would extend your life, slow your aging. You would live longer than any human should. Hundreds of years if you wished." Her breath caught, not in fear, but in the weight of it. "You would watch people you love grow old," he continued. "You would outlive generations. It is not a gift without cost." The clearing was utterly still. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Lucian answered without hesitation. "Then nothing changes between us. I will love you for the span you are given, fully and without regret." Amara closed her eyes. She thought of her faith, not as doctrine, but as trust, of stewardship, of calling, of whether more time was meant to be grasped or received. She opened her eyes and met his. "I don't decide tonight," she said softly, "but I accept the bond." Relief and reverence crossed Lucian's face. The brothers stepped closer, forming a loose circle. No chanting, no spectacle. Lucian pressed his forehead to Amara's, and she felt it, the bond settling, not as fire, but as alignment. As recognition layered deep beneath skin and breath. He did not bite her. Not yet. Instead, he kissed her hand, then her brow. "Thank you," he said, voice thick, "for choosing freely." Amara smiled, heart full and steady. "That's the only way I choose." As they stood together in the firelight, married in body, bonded in spirit, the forest seemed to exhale. 2 ceremonies, 2 vows, 1 life, newly widened, and somewhere between faith and wilderness, between human time and something older, love took its place. Not as possession, but as promise. Chapter 11. The Night That Holds. Morning would come later. For now there was only the night, unhurried, patient, generous in the way sacred things often are. They returned to Amara's home after the forest, after the vows that had settled into bone and breath. The house felt different, not charged, not altered, simply aware, as if it recognized what had crossed its threshold. Lucien closed the door behind them and rested his palm there a moment longer than necessary, grounding himself. Amara turned to him, the quiet between them rich and expectant. They did not rush. They took time to see each other again, not as 2 people circling a choice, but as husband and wife who had stepped fully into it. Lucien's hands framed her face, reverent, his thumbs brushing her cheeks as if learning the contours anew. When he kissed her, it was slow and certain, a kiss that asked nothing and promised everything. She answered him without hesitation. Clothes were shed not in urgency but in trust, piece by piece, each small unveiling a continuation of the vows already spoken. Lucien's touch was attentive, worshipful, hands warm and steady, learning her responses the way one learns a beloved landscape. Amara met him with equal openness, her hands tracing strength and restraint, gratitude and want braided together. When they came together, it was with a fullness that surprised them both. Not hunger alone, though there was that, but recognition. A sense of alignment so complete, it felt like rest. Their bodies moved in a rhythm that belonged to them, unguarded and generous. Lucien held her as if she were precious and powerful at once. Amara welcomed him without reserve, trusting the bond that had already proven itself in daylight and danger alike. There was no need for words. The bond responded quietly. No blaze, no command, just a deepening. A warmth that settled beneath skin and breath. A shared awareness that did not overwhelm, but accompanied. They loved each other fully, freely, without restraint, and when they finally stilled, it was with laughter pressed into sighs, foreheads touching, hearts steady. Later, wrapped together, the night softened around them. Lucien traced slow circles on her back, the wolf in him calm and content, the man present and tender. "Are you all right?" he asked, the question a habit he would never abandon. Amara smiled against his chest. "More than all right." She shifted, fitting herself to him, and felt the truth of it. This was not a taking, not a claiming. It was a keeping that asked consent with every breath. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For choosing with your whole self?" She tilted her head to look at him. "Thank you for meeting me there." They slept then, not collapsed into it but eased, sleep finding them like a blessing. Morning did come, eventually, gentle and ordinary as it always was. Light slipped across the room, birds announced themselves, the town carried on. Amara woke first, aware of Lucien beside her, the bond a calm hum rather than a pull. She slipped into the kitchen to make tea, grounding herself in ritual, smiling when the kettle sang. When Lucien joined her, hair tousled, eyes soft, she felt the quiet certainty again. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Loved," she said simply. "And free." Relief crossed his face. "Good." They sat together, knees touching, sharing tea, and the first easy laughter of a married morning. The future would bring questions about time, about the marking he had offered, about the long arc of what they had chosen. But today held no urgency. Today held truth and warmth and the gentle strength of a love that had chosen not to hurry and had arrived all the same. Chapter 12. The World Returns. The world did not pause for newlyweds. That, Amara discovered, was a comfort. By mid-morning, emails waited. The neighbor downstairs knocked to borrow sugar. The town moved in its familiar rhythm, unaware that 2 vows, one spoken in a church, one sealed beneath ancient trees, had quietly altered the shape of a life. Lucien made breakfast like a man relearning ordinary joy. Eggs, toast, fruit arranged with unnecessary care. He stood at the stove barefoot, sleeves rolled, the domestic scene sitting on him with surprising ease. Amara watched from the doorway, tea warming her hands, struck by how deeply right it felt to see him here, inside the everyday. "You don't have to hover," she said gently. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm appreciating." She laughed. "You can appreciate from the table." He smiled and joined her, sliding a plate across. Their knees touched, the bond stirred, not demanding, not possessive, just present, like a shared breath. "Today," he said, "I need to check the perimeter north of town." She nodded. "The feral?" "Yes, he hasn't crossed again, but he's close enough to be remembered." "Do you want me worried?" "No," Lucien said. "I want you informed." She reached for his hand. "Then we're doing this right." Later, as Amara left for work, Nadine appeared at the corner as if summoned by instinct. She didn't greet them with questions. She scanned Lucien first, then Amara, and exhaled. "It's settled," Nadine said. "The bond's clean." Lucien inclined his head. "Thank you for watching." Nadine's gaze sharpened. "I wasn't watching you." Amara smiled. "I know." At work, Amara noticed the difference immediately. Not distraction, clarity. Decisions that once felt heavy came easier. Boundaries held. She delegated without guilt. When a colleague pressed for more than was reasonable, she said no without apology and felt no ripple of doubt afterward. At lunch, her brother called. "You sound different," he said. "Different how?" "Like someone who slept," he replied. Then softer, "Like someone who's at peace." "I am," she said. "And I'm not stepping away from my life." "Good," he said. "Because it's yours." That evening, Lucien returned with news. "He's moving east," he said, setting his jacket down. "The brothers will shadow him until he crosses the boundary." "And after?" "After," Lucien said, "we live." They cooked together, shoulders brushing, the house filling with warmth and sound. When dusk settled, they walked the neighborhood. Neighbors waving, a couple stopping to congratulate them on the quiet wedding they'd heard about through the efficient network of small-town kindness. Later, as night drew in, Amara stood on the porch with Lucien, the stars faint above the town's glow. "There will be more moments," Lucien said, "when my world intrudes." "And there will be days when mine does," she replied. "Meet me there too." He turned to her, earnest. "Always." She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the truth of it. This marriage was not a retreat from the world. It was a way of standing more firmly in it. Somewhere beyond the trees, the feral moved on. Somewhere within the town, a new rhythm took hold. And inside the small house with the ordinary porch light, two lives, human and shifter, continued, not hidden, not exalted, but joined, ready to meet whatever came next together. Epilogue. What grows? Love did not change Amara and Lucien all at once. It deepened them. Time settled into its work gently. Mornings grew patterned. Coffee brewed while the light was still unsure of itself. Lucien reading at the table while Amara moved through the quiet with practiced grace. Evenings filled with shared meals, walks, laughter that came easily now, unguarded. Their home became a place people lingered. Mariama dropped by unannounced and stayed too long. Aisha brought food and left stories behind. Nadine came less often, but when she did, she came fully. Eyes sharp, presence unmistakable. And then, life did what it always does when love makes room for it. It arrived. Amara's pregnancy was discovered on an ordinary afternoon, confirmed without ceremony, held first in silence. Lucien listened to her heartbeat that night with his ear pressed gently to her chest, eyes closed, the wolf in him utterly still. "Our child," he said softly. "Human, whole, loved." The brothers came quietly after that, not as sentinels, not as enforcers, as family. Matthew stood at the edge of the yard, hands in his pockets, watching Lucien move carefully around Amara as her body changed. Etienne smiled openly, already planning ways to make the world safer in small, unseen increments. Renee hovered at a distance, pretending not to care while checking the perimeter twice as often as necessary. And Nadine arrived one late afternoon with a look Amara had never seen on her before. Not guarded, not vigilant, curious. Lucian felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. "She's ready," he said quietly. "For what?" Amara asked. "For us," he replied. For them. They met at the clearing just before dusk, the same place where vows had been witnessed, where bonds had been named without spectacle. Nadine stood beside Amara at first, posture protective by instinct, eyes tracking every movement. The brothers approached slowly, openly. No challenge, no posturing. Mathieu inclined his head. Etienne smiled. Renee stilled. And Julien? Julien met Nadine's gaze and did not look away. Something passed between them. Old as instinct, new as breath. Nadine felt it and laughed softly under her breath. "Of course," she murmured. "It would be one of you." Julian's mouth curved, thoughtful. "I was thinking the same." Lucian watched from beside Amara, his hand steady on hers. "This is Nadine," Amara said simply. "She is under my protection," Lucian added, "which means she is under ours." Nadine's eyes softened, not weakly, but knowingly. "Good," she said, "because I don't walk into anything alone." Julian stepped forward then, not claiming, not demanding. "Walk with me," he said, "if you choose." Nadine studied him, the lioness in her alert, but unthreatened. "I don't rush," she replied. Julian nodded. "Neither do I." The clearing exhaled. Later, as the fire burned low and the evening cooled, Amara leaned into Lucian, one hand resting over the gentle curve of her belly. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. Lucian shook his head. "I imagined survival, balance, duty, and now?" "And now," he said, kissing her hair, "I imagine birthdays, school mornings, teaching our child how to listen to the world without carrying it alone." She smiled, eyes shining. "You're going to be a good father." He swallowed. "I'll learn. The way I learned you." Nearby, Nadine and Julian spoke quietly, voices low, something tentative and promising taking shape between them. A new story beginning. The old ones held, and in the space between forest and town, between instinct and choice, love continued its quiet work. Not ending stories, but multiplying them. Interlude. Years, not days. Time did not rush them. That was the first thing Amara learned about loving Lucian across years instead of moments. Love, when it was tended instead of chased, expanded quietly. It filled spaces you didn't know had been empty. Not with urgency, but with ease. 5 years passed like that. Not marked by dramatic turns, but by accumulation. Mornings layered onto mornings. Winters softened by routine. Summers stretched wide with laughter and long evenings on the porch. Their home grew into itself. Bookshelves fuller, floors worn smooth where feet passed often. A small garden out back that Lucian tended with a patience that bordered on reverence. Their child learned to walk beneath the apple tree first. Amara watched from the kitchen window as Lucian crouched low, arms open, voice gentle and steady. No rush, no coaxing, just presence. When small feet finally wobbled forward and landed solidly against his chest, Lucian closed his eyes, like the world had aligned, exactly as it should. Again, the child demanded, breathless and proud. Lucian laughed, open, unguarded, and lifted them high. Amara felt the familiar swell in her chest. Gratitude, braided with awe. This life had not been promised to her. It had been chosen. Inside, later the house was quiet again. Their child napped, curled like a comma in the afternoon light. Amara and Lucian sat at the table, hands wrapped around mugs gone lukewarm. "You're thinking again," Lucian said. Amara smiled faintly. "You always know. The bond makes it difficult to miss," he replied gently. "What is it this time?" She traced the rim of her mug. "I was remembering who I was when we met. And I was full," she said. "But I didn't know how much fuller life could be without losing myself." Lucian reached for her hand. "You never disappeared." "No," she agreed. Neither did you. They sat in companionable silence, the kind that only came from long familiarity. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Steady, patient, older than both of them. Do you ever regret it? Amara asked quietly. Lucian did not need clarification. No, he said without hesitation. Not the grief I know will come. Not the time I know I will outlive. She met his gaze. And the marking? He smiled softly. Still your choice. She leaned back, considering, not with fear but discernment. The option remained open, as it always had. A longer life, a widening of time, a different kind of stewardship. I don't feel rushed, she said. That is the only answer that matters, Lucian replied. A knock sounded at the door then, familiar, unannounced. Nadine entered with the confidence of someone who belonged, Julian just behind her, quieter but no less present. Their dynamic had settled into something unmistakable over the years. Not mirrored, not merged. Balanced. I brought soup, Nadine announced. And news, Amara smiled. That sounds dangerous, Julian's mouth curved. Only a little. As they gathered around the table, voices overlapping, plans unfolding, Amara watched the way Julian's attention never strayed far from Nadine, even as he gave her all the space she demanded. She saw herself there years ago. The same careful choosing, the same refusal to rush what deserved patience. Lucian leaned close, voice low. The world keeps growing. Yes, Amara said. Because we let it. That night, after the house had quieted again, and their child slept safe and dreaming, Amara stood with Lucian beneath the stars. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady truth of his heart. I don't measure our love in years, she said softly. Lucian's arm tightened around her. Nor do I. What do you measure it in? He thought for a moment. Mornings. Returns. The way you still choose me without being asked. She smiled into the fabric of his shirt. Then we're wealthy. They stood there, two lives intertwined not by haste or spectacle, but by the long, faithful work of love, not measured in days, but in what endured between them. This has been The Quiet Alignment. Thank you for listening.